When I saw my cousin Kyle holding that pale blue ribbon, his greasy thumb smudging the bronze star that my grandfather had literally bled for, I didn't just see red, I saw the end of everything they thought they were entitled to. He was dangling the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration our country can bestow. A sacred symbol of ultimate sacrifice like it was some cheap trinket he'd fished out of a cereal box. Turning to his mother and asking, "Hey Ma, what do you think this tacky thing is worth at a pawn shop? Maybe $50. That was the moment. That was the exact split second where the grief that had been drowning me for a week hardened into a cold, razor-sharp blade of pure vengeance. My grandfather, the man who raised me when nobody else would, was barely cold in his grave, and these vultures, these people who hadn't visited him in a decade, were already picking his bones clean. And now they were desecrating the one thing he valued more than his own life. I knew right then that I wasn't just going to kick them out of his house. I was going to use that medal to utterly dismantle their lives, ensuring that the symbol of his bravery was the instrument of their financial and social ruin. But looking back, with the wreckage of our family all around me, I have to ask, was the punishment I dealt out too severe, or did they deserve every single thing that happened to them for spitting on a hero's legacy? You have to understand who my grandfather was to understand why my reaction was so nuclear. Pop wasn't just a veteran. He was a phantom, a quiet, gentle soul haunted by ghosts he never spoke about. He raised me from the time I was 7 years old after my parents died in a car wreck, taking in a scared, angry little kid when he was already nearing retirement age. He never raised his voice, never drank, and lived a life of almost monastic simplicity in the small, paid-off house he'd built with his own hands in the late 50s. For years I didn't even know he had seen combat, let alone done what he did. The Medal of Honor wasn't framed on the wall above the fireplace. It wasn't something he brought out at barbecues to brag about. It was hidden away in a fireproof lockbox beneath the floorboards of his bedroom closet, along with a stack of faded letters and a photo of his entire platoon, most of whom never came home. I only found out about it when I was 16 and doing a school project on local veterans. I interviewed him, expecting stories about peeling potatoes or fixing trucks. Instead, after hours of gentle prodding, he quietly unlocked that box, laid the medal on the kitchen table, and told me the most horrifying story I've ever heard. It involved an ambush in a freezing Korean valley, him being wounded 3 times, carrying 4 of his brothers down a mountain under heavy machine gun fire, and single-handedly neutralizing a mortar position that was decimating his unit. He didn't tell it like an action movie. He told it like a confession, weeping silently the entire time. He told me he didn't feel brave. He felt guilty that he survived when better men didn't. He viewed that medal not as an award, but as a heavy burden of responsibility to live a good life on behalf of those who couldn't. That medal was holy to me. It was the physical manifestation of his character. And then there was his sister, my great-aunt Brenda, and her 40-year-old failed entrepreneur son, Kyle. Brenda was the polar opposite of Pop. Where he was generous to a fault, she was grasping and materialistic. Where he was humble, she was loudly obsessed with appearances. They lived 3 states away, and in the 20 years I lived with Pop, I think I saw them 4 times. Each visit was short, filled with passive-aggressive comments about Pop's outdated furniture or his lack of ambition, and always ended with Brenda asking for a small loan to tide Kyle over until his next big break loans that were never repaid. Pop always gave it to them, sighing and saying, "Their family, kiddo, it's what you do." When Pop Pop got sick 6 months ago, aggressive pancreatic cancer. I became his full-time caregiver. I moved back into my old room, managed his meds, took him to appointments, and held his hand through the chemo illness. I called Brenda the day of the diagnosis. Her response, "Oh, that's terrible. Listen, we're swamped right now. Kyle's launching a new crypto venture, but keep us posted." They never visited. Not once. Not even when I called 3 weeks ago to tell them he had entered hospice care and didn't have long. Brenda sent a text with a sad face emoji and said, "Thoughts and prayers." But the literal second, I called them to say he had passed away peacefully in his sleep, the tone changed. Suddenly they were devastated. Suddenly they needed to be there for family. They showed up the day after the funeral, rolling up in a leased BMW, wearing expensive, flashy clothes that seemed wildly inappropriate for a house of mourning. I was exhausted, practically a zombie from grief and lack of sleep. I hadn't even begun to process that the most important person in my life was gone. I let them in because Pop would have wanted me to. That was my mistake. Within an hour, the pretense dropped. They weren't there to mourn. They were there to assess the inventory. Brenda started walking around touching things, humming, "Well, this antique cabinet might be worth something if refinished. And I wonder if he still has those savings bonds mother left him." Kyle immediately planted himself on the couch, complaining about the slow Wi-Fi and asking when the lawyer was reading the will. "We need to wrap this up," he said, checking his gold watch. "Mom and I have assets we need to liquidate so we can reinvest." I tried to be polite. I really did. "Can we please just sit and talk about him for a moment? Can we not do this today?" I begged, feeling tears prick my eyes again. Brenda waved her hand dismissively. "Oh honey, don't be morbid. He's gone. Life belongs to the living. We have to be practical. He would want us to be taken care of." The audacity of using his generosity against me made my stomach churn. The breaking point came on the third day they were squatting in the house. I had gone out for 20 minutes to grab groceries, the first time I'd left the house since the funeral. When I came back, I walked into chaos. They had torn the house apart. Drawers were dumped out on the floor, closets were ransacked, mattresses were overturned. It looked like a burglary. I dropped the grocery bags, eggs smashing on the hardwood floor. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed. Brenda popped out of Pop's bedroom, dusty and triumphant. "We're just organizing, dear, looking for important papers. You know how absent-minded he got at the end." And then Kyle walked out of the closet. He had found the loose floorboard. He was holding the lockbox. My heart stopped. I had forgotten to move it. I had been so consumed with caring for him that I forgot his most sacred possession was vulnerable. Kyle had forced the lock with a screwdriver. He tossed the photos of the dead platoon onto the floor like trash and pulled out the velvet case. He opened it, and that's when I walked in. That's when he made the $50 at a pawn shop comment, smudging the bronze star with his greasy thumb. The sound that came out of me wasn't human. It was a primal roar of anguish and rage. I flew across the room and snatched the medal from his hands so fast he stumbled back. "Don't you dare touch that," I hissed, my voice trembling with a fury that frightened even me. "You have no idea what this is. You aren't worthy to be in the same room as this." Kyle laughed, a nasty, sneering sound. "Relax, tough guy. It's just some old war medal, probably brass. What's the big deal? Did he win it for peeling the most potatoes?" Brenda chimed in. Now, don't be selfish with grandfather's things. We should get it appraised. We split everything 50-50, that's only fair. You can't hoard the valuable stuff." I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the greed in their eyes, the complete lack of empathy, the hollow void where a soul should be. They didn't care about him. They didn't care about his sacrifice. They just wanted to consume everything he had left behind. I realized in that moment that if I just kicked them out, they would sue me. They would drag his name and his legacy through probate court for years just to get a few $1,000s. I needed to stop them permanently. I needed to make sure they got absolutely nothing. And I realized, holding that heavy bronze star in my shaking hand, that Pop had given me the weapon to do it. So, that's the situation I was in, standing in a ransacked room with the two people who should have been grieving with me, but were instead trying to pawn my grandfather's soul. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to pause this video, go to the comments, and tell me what you would have done. Would you have just thrown them out? Would you have tried to reason with them? Or would you have done what I did and go for total, scorched earth victory? Let me know below. I'm waiting. Okay, here is what happened. I didn't scream anymore. A terrifying calm washed over me. I lowered the metal, cradling it gently against my chest. "You're right, Brenda," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "We need to be practical. We need to follow the law." They looked confused by my sudden shift. "The lawyer is coming tomorrow at 10 a.m. to read the will. We shouldn't touch anything else until then. Let's wait for the official reading." Brenda smiled, thinking she had won. "See, that's sensible. No need for dramatics." They spent the rest of the night cataloging the furniture, ignoring me completely. I spent the rest of the night on the phone with Mr. Henderson, Pop's ancient, razor-sharp attorney. I told him everything. I told him about the ransacking, the comments, the disrespect, and I asked him about the code. See, Pop had mentioned something years ago when he first showed me the medal. He said there were laws about it, federal laws, and that he had put special instructions in his will regarding it. I had forgotten until that moment. Mr. Henderson listened, his breathing heavy on the other end of the line. When I finished describing Kyle trying to pawn it, there was a long silence. Then Mr. Henderson said, "He did what? He tried to sell it." I confirmed. "Okay, son," Mr. Henderson said, and I could hear the steel in his tone. "Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day. Don't say a word to them. Just make sure that metal is on the table when I arrive." The next morning, we sat around the dining room table. Brenda and Kyle were practically vibrating with anticipation. I sat opposite them, the velvet case sitting closed on the table in front of me. Mr. Henderson arrived, looking like an executioner in a tailored suit. He set his briefcase down, opened it slowly, and pulled out the will. He began reading the standard stuff funeral arrangements, small bequests to charities. Brenda was getting impatient. Yes, wonderful, but what about the house, the savings, the main estate?" Mr. Henderson paused and looked over his reading glasses at her. "Patience, madame. We are arriving at the primary disbursements." He continued reading. "Article 7, the residuary estate. I give, devise, and bequeath all the rest, residue, and remainder of my estate, real and personal, of whatever nature and wherever situated, 50% to my grandson, my name, and 50% to my sister, Brenda, to be shared with her issue as she sees fit." Brenda clapped her hands together, letting out a little squeal. Kyle pumped his fist. "Yes, 50%. We can sell this dump and the land. That's at least 300 grand for our half, Ma." I just sat there, staring at the metal case. They hadn't heard the but. Mr. Henderson held up a hand for silence. I was not finished. There is a condition precedent to Article 7. The room went dead silent. Brenda's smile faltered. "A what?" "A condition," Mr. Henderson repeated. "Article 8, the preservation of honor clause." He turned a page, his demeanor darkening. My grandfather was a very specific man. I murmured, finally looking up at them. Mr. Henderson read aloud, "This 50 division of the residuary estate is wholly contingent upon the respectful treatment of my military effects, specifically the Medal of Honor bestowed upon me by the United States Congress. This medal is not property. It is a trust. It is prohibited by Federal Law 18 U.S. Code Section 704 to buy, sell, barter, or manufacture any decoration or medal authorized by Congress for the armed forces of the United States." Brenda looked confused. "So, we can't sell it. Fine. I just said that yesterday. We'll just keep it." Mr. Henderson kept reading, his voice rising slightly. "Furthermore, should any beneficiary under this will attempt to sell, pawn, disparage, desecrate, or treat with contempt this specific medal, that beneficiary and their direct lineage shall immediately forfeit their entire share of the residuary estate. Said forfeited share shall revert entirely to the other named beneficiary, provided they have maintained the honor of the decoration." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Brenda's face went completely pale. Kyle looked like he'd been slapped with a wet fish. What does that mean?" Kyle stammered. Mr. Henderson closed the folder. He looked directly at Kyle. "It means, young man, that when you removed that medal from its secure location yesterday, handled it with disrespect, and explicitly stated your intent to pawn it for $50, a statement my name has corroborated, and which I am certain you would not like tested in open court under penalty of perjury. You triggered Article 8. He paused for maximum effect. "It means you get nothing. The house, the savings, the bonds, nothing." Brenda exploded. "You can't do that. That's illegal. He was just joking. We're family." She turned to me, her eyes wild. "Tell him my name. Tell him Kyle was just joking. You can't steal our inheritance over a piece of metal." I slowly opened the velvet box, revealing the star and the pale blue ribbon. The morning sun caught the bronze, making it glow. I looked Brenda dead in the eye. "It's not just metal, Brenda. It's his life. It's the lives of the men who died around him, and you treated it like garbage." I looked at Mr. Henderson. "They violated the clause. I want them removed from my house." The aftermath was ugly. There was screaming, threats of lawsuits, fake tears, begging. Kyle tried to physically grab the will from Mr. Henderson, and I had to step in, threatening to call the police. They left eventually, peeling out of the driveway in their leased BMW, furious and destitute. Mr. Henderson had structured the will ironically. Their attempt to grab quick cash off the medal was the exact legal trigger that specifically blocked them from the real money. They tried to challenge the will for about a month, but no lawyer would take their case once they saw the specific wording of the preservation of honor clause and heard my testimony about what Kyle did. They were broke. They had burned their bridge with the only family they had left, and they had nothing to show for their greed but the memory of the medal they scorned. As for me, I still live in Pop's house. I didn't want their half of the money, so I donated an amount equal to what they would have inherited to a charity that supports wounded veterans in Pop's name. The Medal of Honor doesn't live under the floorboards anymore. I loaned it to the local history museum, where it sits in a secure, climate-controlled display case with a plaque telling the story of what he did on that frozen mountain in Korea. The last thing Brenda and Kyle really saw of my grandfather wasn't his face. It was the medal they tried to cheapen, the symbol that ended up judging them and finding them wanting. Some people say I was too harsh, that family is family no matter what. But I believe some things are sacred, and if you spit on the sacrifice of a better man for a quick buck, you deserve exactly what you get. That's my story. I don't feel good about how it ended, there's no joy in it, but I feel like I did my duty. I protected what he couldn't protect himself. If you think I did the right thing, please hit that like button to show your support for veterans and their legacy. If you think I was the asshole, tell me why in the comments. I really want to know your perspective on this mess. And if you want to hear more stories about karma coming to collect its due, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you all in the next story.